another thing I would like to touch on, and that is that the understanding of virtual reality, again, to the credit of Facebook and Oculus, the company that developed Oculus before Facebook, and all of the competitors, the amount of work that the machine does, the computer in the headset, is absolutely extraordinary compared to all previous computing systems, except those that the government and military had, which were always stronger and incredibly more expensive. They always had the latest gadgets. But the thing about this is, in the real world, we don't consider that the rock is really doing anything. And if it falls, not much is happening. They hit each other, they fall off. What we don't consider, and I don't think, as I mentioned it in one of the other videos, but it deserves more comment, is that in virtual realities, the programmers know this, these things are all being maintained constantly, with everything being watched, monitored, so that if I pick up this rock and toss it, I'll try to hit the other rock. The interaction, if I throw the rock without hitting the other rock, it lands. And it acts actually a little bit more like Play-Doh than a rocket points. It doesn't bounce quite as far as I would expect, but that's okay. If it hits the other rock, and notice it rolled on that one. It tumbled. There was enough momentum to keep it rolling over onto its side. There we go. When it hit that rock in passing, gliding past it, that rock moved. Now that was a fairly simple interaction, but all of the things that they have here that are objects, these other rocks over here, and I know there are a couple of rocks behind us. I'm not sure that they have anything else that you can actually, like the grass over there. I haven't been able to actually reach down and grab that. They have the surface of the bigger rock mapped within about 20 feet. That's really good. But there's nothing you can do with those rocks. They're locked down. You can't move them. But the point here is the interaction that you saw there when this rock went past this rock and just clipped the edge of it like that, was an interaction where that had to be considered and calculated, and the adjustments had to be made in the reality by the computer to make sure that this rock acknowledged the surface of this rock and the mass of this rock, applying a force to it. Now I'm applying it with my fingers, but what you saw a moment ago was this rock was tossed. It wasn't my fingers applying the force to this rock that made this one move up. It moved up a little bit when this rock hit it, and it hit it on the corner, and that's what we saw. But if I had, say I had 20 of these little rock objects here, that's what I did with the pile of rocks when I was doing that. The computer inside the Oculus, the model of a mind, the computer being a model of the mind, was doing all of the fantastic physics calculations to say, okay, for this much mass, approximately, whatever they assign to it, and for this much force, and for this much gravitational pull also, because you're seeing that as the rock, it doesn't float away, it goes down toward the Earth because of the artificial definition of gravity that's being given to these. Everything here is drawn toward the Earth, just with an artificial force of gravity applied to all the objects here. All of those things are constantly monitored and updated. So if you imagined it as a high-speed photographic film, frame by frame, as the little frame is done, the Oculus computer is calculating what's happening to all of the objects at this specific point. Say, pretend it was, say the rock was flying midair. Now it did it pretty quickly. It's flying here. Now it made a contact there. So for that frame, it had to say, are they still in contact? What's the force applied? How does hitting that cause a force back, a kickback from this rock, as like the billiard balls that hit each other and ricochet? That all of those considerations are made moment by moment. So if you imagine like a 30 frame per second video, one to what's happening here, what's happening here, what's happening here, what's happening here. Okay, they touch. So this one hits the lower rock. It starts to go up. This rock may get a rebound force, opposite forces, So all of those things are accounted for. Now the computer is working furiously for these things, or if we had a few more objects, to do all of those calculations and to keep these things maintaining their shapes without atoms, because atoms aren't necessary, and to make sure that the forces. So when I threw this, I threw it, it left my hands, okay? The rock, I'm pretending I'm not holding it now. I'm trying to show the flight path of the rock. It went past most of this rock. It clipped just the edge there, and then it continued on. And all of the ability to say the distance, and did it bounce upward at all based on the ricochet from this rock and go maybe a little bit further? And then what happens? It encounters friction as it lands. Does it go like a skipping stone, like across a stream when you throw them? All of those things are accounted for instant by instant. Probably, I would guess for this application, probably like 30 frames a second, or whatever the top speed is maybe 60 or something like that. You don't have to go 1,000 times a second. But you get the picture. All of these things are updated so that the reason the rock landed here was not because it's a rock. It's not a real rock. It's an artificially defined rock. Is our reality a real reality? No, it didn't pre-exist. It doesn't self-exist. The Bible tells us nothing existed until God created it. Therefore, it's a virtual reality. It's an artificial reality by definition. It's not being run by a computer. It's being run directly by God. My understanding is by his mind. He can do all these things. But also what that means is he is fully active in upholding our creation. That's no small thing. He's doing in the real world, when you throw the rock and it does that, if this is a virtual reality, then it's more than just the rock does this because it's a rock. It's because God defined and upholds the rules for atoms and gravity and everything else all at the same time. So just as the Oculus computer had to do the fantastic number of frames per second to try to get this to imitate a rock in our reality would be doing the same thing. God would be doing the same thing. So when I make the command, the decision to throw the rock, God not only upholds all the atoms that make up my body, he's carrying out my commands as a servant by allowing me to play with this reality. And these things have no definitions on their own. They only have the definitions that God gave them and upholds. So what that means is this is not a passive reality. This is God working. If he were able to be exhausted or tired, we would say he is working furiously to maintain all of the requests that we made. Here's my request. I want to throw this rock. He's actually controlling the demands I make of, I want to move my arm. We don't run our bodies. He's running our bodies. But we're making the commands, because that's what happens in the Oculus. I'm by using my arm outside, I'm actually passing commands to the Oculus. I want my Oculus hand to move. That's what's going on. So this takes us from one extreme to the other. Rather than God winding up the universe and walking away because rocks were just rocks and they did what rocks do, and so on and so forth, this was something God designed and upholds. And we take it for granted that he's not really active in it. We don't know where God is. You should flip to the other extreme and say God is communicating with us constantly by upholding his creation, because we wouldn't see it, we wouldn't hear it, and it wouldn't be updated. We wouldn't be able to move our bodies. Our hearts wouldn't beat because the atoms wouldn't be updated. And God's doing all that. and he never complains. How about that? But that is the way he describes. He knows the sparrows fall. He feeds and takes care of everything, including us. You know, it's a harsh world out there, but on the flip side, he's monitoring everything. And does he shout or complain when we make stupid remarks about him? Or take this for granted and say, hey, this rock actually has gold in it. I'm going to put it over here. No, what he says, what are you thinking? You want real treasure, store it up with me in heaven, because this won't exist in the future. And if you took the Oculus helmet off, you'd realize that. This doesn't have an existence outside of God supporting it. So if you're trying to hide treasure on planet Earth, good luck. And what does it say you're doing about God's word by saying, this is mine, I'm going to keep it? What an attitude. God's letting you use this. He's following your commands on, I want to move my arm, I want to push this rock. We're sort of like 2- and 3-year-olds in the way we relate to God sometimes, what babies we are. So just food for thought. God being more active in upholding our creation, carrying out our commands every day, every moment, than we realize. What do we have on our own that God hasn't supplied? Nothing. Access to thoughts, that comes from Him. It's His abilities that He gave us. The ability to think, the ability to make decisions, the ability to do something, but we're using His reality, which He upholds. So really, we're just issuing the commands to do things. And that's kind of the way He describes it. Like, what are you thinking? One of the disciples said, well, how do you know me? I saw you under the tree. Well, how did you see me? They didn't pursue the conversation, but if they had, it would have been, how did you see me? Because He sees everything. He sees everyone. He's not limited to the eyes of this body. He sees everything. And that, as programmers, we understand that when you contain the thoughts, you can examine all the thoughts at once. That's what we've learned from computer technology. Random access, it's all there. And you look at everything at once.